Daniel 3:16 through 28. There's three words in this passage that represent the strongest declaration of faith in the entire story, if not the Bible, and in our story as well. I don't know if anyone knows what those words are, but I've said this up here before, and you may pick them up. You can see if you can spot them here in a second when I read the verse. But to understand the power, we need to understand what led Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to the furnace. That's the story from the Old Testament. King Nebuchadnezzar was the most powerful man in Babylon. He built an enormous golden image and commanded everyone to bow before it whenever the music played. That was a cue to bow before the statue. And this wasn't just some, patriotic ceremony. Bowing meant worship. It meant allegiance to the king's gods, and you had to do it. It was simple. You bow or you burn. That's it. That was what it was in the kingdom. Now, Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego, which, by the way, wasn't their real names, but they were Jews, and they were far from home because Babylon had already taken their country, taken everything, changed their names, and attempted to reshape their identity into their culture. And now the king was demanding the one thing that none of them could surrender, and that's their worship. They were not going to surrender their worship. So now I'm going to read the passage. You can probably, if you've heard me talk about this, you know what three words I'm talking about. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we're thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from it, from your majesty's hand. If not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude toward them changed. He ordered the furnace heated up 7 times hotter than usual, and he commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent and the furnace so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? They replied, certainly, your majesty. He said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire. And the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair on their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Did anyone spot the 3 words? Who said that? You can't say that. You already know. You're not supposed to. Yeah, okay. They can, nope. Just that. Anyway, they could have. We'll get to that in a minute. They could have reasoned their way out of this, and this is what mirrors life now. This is what mirrors the risks we take in our faith, the small compromises, which comes up a lot in all sermons and all churches, not just me. But they could have reasoned their way out of it. They could have said, you know what, we can bow physically because God knows our hearts. He knows we don't worship this stuff. So we can just do it physically, but God knows us. He knows that we don't really worship this. People do that a lot. They could have said, look, everyone's doing it. I mean, just do it real quick. It's not a big deal. And we're not putting our heart into this thing. Just do it so we can just move on. Or another thing people say, well, God knows where we can further the kingdom of heaven more if we stay alive. So let's just do what he says. We'll bow to it because God knows we can accomplish more for his kingdom if we stay alive by doing it. And that's the way to stay alive, is to bow. We should do that. They could have done that. They could have bowed for a few seconds and just blended into the crowd to avoid the furnace. When the music come on, they didn't do it. They said they weren't going to do it. This is one of the key parts of this entire message. They understood that faithfulness is often decided in moments that appear small to everyone except God. Moments that appear small to everyone except God. Those are the moments in life when we go, that's not that big of a deal. I can just do this one thing. I don't have to talk about Jesus. I don't want to go Jesus-y. They might get weird. That person's a nice person. I know they're in rebellion against God, and me having lunch with them isn't condoning that behavior, these small moments are big moments to God. They're small moments to us, but they're big moments to God. And when brought before the king, what'd they say? If we're thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. Well, that is faith. They knew God was able. They knew God was able to do it. And they knew that the king's authority did not exceed God's authority. The flames can't become hotter than God can handle just because he had them cranked up. The soldiers could tie their hands, but they can't tie God's hands. These three knew that. And then they added those words that carried all their faith to an entirely different level. And if not, those are the three strongest words. In other words, our God can rescue us, but even if he chooses not to, we still will not bow. Even if he chooses not to. Immature faith says, I'll trust God if he does what I ask. If God answers this prayer, if you save this person, if you do this thing then I'll trust God. That's immature faith. That is faith that's wavering. But mature faith says, I will trust God because he's God. Even if he doesn't do what I ask, I'll trust God. And there is a significant difference between believing that God can do something and demanding he must do something. And that's where a lot of people fall. And the Bible repeatedly says that's wrong, but people give into the human nature of sin. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they didn't know how the story was going to end. That's the important. We have the whole story, but they didn't know how this was going to end when they were saying that. They didn't have verse 24 and through 28. They didn't know there would be another figure in the fire. People say, who was the figure? Was it an angel or was it Christ? The pre-incarnate Christ. Which is all through the Old Testament. That's called a Christophany. When Christ, before he took on human form, is in the Old Testament, because in the Old Testament, when you hear about people, it's always the angel of the Lord. That's the pre-incarnate Christ. And in the New Testament, it changes. It's always an angel of the Lord, not the angel of the Lord. But that's kind of another story. Well, who is it? Is it the pre-incarnate Christ? Is this a Christophany, or is it an angel? Well, you can debate that with everybody else in the world of theology. It is of God. That's what matters. Whether you think it's an angel, as Nebuchadnezzar thought it was, or you think it's Christ himself, it's all holy. It's all from the Father. They didn't know this figure that walked among them in the furnace. They didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know that they'd walk out unharmed either when they said, and if not. All they knew that God was worthy of their worship. And if not means a lot of things. It means a lot of things that apply to our lives. And if not. God can heal me. And if not, he's still God. God can, I got this relationship. It's breaking my friendship with this person. It's south. It's going bad. God can restore this. And if not, he's still good. God can open this door. I'm having a hard time getting through this thing in my life, and this person's not doing well, and I'm struggling with some anger issues. God can do this for me. And if not, he still knows where he's leading me. God got a problem in my life, and I need God to remove it. It's a physical thing. I'm fighting with doctors, and I just can't. I know God could take this burden out of my life. I know he can. I know he can take this. And if not, his grace will carry me beneath it. And if not, Those are arguably the strongest words in the Bible regarding the reality that we don't worship God because of what He can do for us. We worship God because of who He is. God can answer exactly the way I prayed if He wants. And if not, I will trust His wisdom because I know God sees what I can't see. They couldn't see what was coming. They didn't know they'd be rescued. Isn't it interesting? And if not, I absolutely will not bow to you, even if it means I have to suffer. There is no way I'm turning my back on God, and that's when God does His best work. Amen? He did it. Sometimes we treat faith like it's a transaction. People treat faith like it's a transaction. And I believe, therefore, God, you better perform. I mean, I pray, so give me the answer I'm asking for. I serve in the church, God. So make sure I don't want to be disappointed. People think that. Some people don't think it, and they live it though. And whether they know they're thinking it. But God's not a machine to where we put in a faith coin and get out a preferred outcome. Well, thank you, God. It doesn't place God under. Listen, this is the bottom line. Faith doesn't place God under our authority. It places us under His authority. That's the whole point. And if not, doesn't mean we stop. We're supposed to pray boldly. You should pray boldly. I mean, these men clearly believed God could save them. They had no doubt. They believed for certain He could save them. And we should ask God to help, provide, to protect us, to intervene when things aren't going well. And you should pray with expectations. But our confidence has to rest in God's character, not in the outcome. No one should ever be disappointed in God. I hear people, well, it just feels like He turned His back on me. It feels like God's not listening. It feels like God abandoned me. Well, that "and if not" part is important. Okay, quick recap. King becomes furious. Ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual, which means he was irrational. He was angry. He was letting his emotions control him. The fire was so intense, it killed the soldiers who carried the 3 men toward it. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, tied up and thrown in. King sees something impossible and says, "Weren't these the 3 men that we tied up and threw in the fire?" His advisors assured him that there were 3, but the king said, "I see 4 of them walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed." You see what's going on here? God didn't keep them from going into the furnace. He met them inside of the furnace. We enter our own furnaces. We only feel abandoned if we succumb to weak, selfish faith by abandoning the truth that God is near us. He went in with them. He met them inside. He didn't stop the fire. And a lot of times we ask God to, prove you're here, God, by stopping the fire. So I don't want to even face this thing. I know you can deal with it, but I don't even want to face it. Prove you're here. Prove you're real. Sometimes God often proves His presence by walking through fires with us. And, theologically, and with just common sense, you learn from difficult times. We don't really learn from things that celebrate. Like what we talked about Solomon. Better go to a funeral than a wedding. Wedding's a wonderful, beautiful thing. Absolutely wonderful. But a funeral causes you to think about life, to ponder who you are, to ponder what you've done, to ponder what's in front of you. Same principle. The miracle was not merely that they survived, though. The text says they were thrown in firmly tied, but the new king saw them walking around unbound. And this is an important part to think about. He didn't stop the fire because the fire burned away what was binding them. It didn't burn them at all. But because of that kind of faith, and if not, the fire burned away what was binding them without hurting them at all. Sometimes the trials that we ask God to remove from our life is the very place where He breaks something off of us that needed to be broken off of us. Sometimes it's our illusion of control or our dependence upon approval, other people's approval, fear of people. And that fire, God will break those things off of you. And that's a good thing. Or belief that faith guarantees an easy life. That's not an easy life. 2 seconds before they went in there, they didn't know how it was going to end. That's not easy. But they still said, and if not, what was intended to destroy them became the place where they experienced God in its deepest way. I'm going to talk about this guy for a minute because this applies to this. I don't know if you've ever heard of Richard Wurmbrand, but I put that up there because as I talk about him, that book's free. If you go to that web link, it literally says, what's your name and address? No money, just boom, you get it in the mail. Send it to you. But I want to talk about him. There's a lot of people I could have talked about. Richard Wurmbrand was a Romanian pastor who, after his own major furnace in his life, he founded the Voice of the Martyrs. He was arrested under communist Romania because of his Christian witness. He spent 14 years in prison. 3 of those were in solitary confinement. I think they told his wife he was dead. They locked her up too for a while. He was tortured a lot because he would not renounce Jesus Christ. So his prison cell, he was put there to be destroyed. That's all they wanted to do. They wanted to silence his preachings, break his mind, crush his body. They wanted him to either abandon God or to feel abandoned by God. But the place meant to destroy him became the place where Christ got the most personal to him. And Wurmbrand later wrote and spoke about the presence of Christ in prison and about how his suffering became the foundation of the worldwide ministry to all Christians. His prison cell was his furnace. Christ met him there. The presence of Jesus turned that prison into holy ground. That can be done in our furnaces. What was intended to wreck him and destroy him became the place where he discovered that chains can hold the body, but nothing can keep Christ out. Nothing can keep Christ out. The events of his life connect directly to Daniel 3. He, in the same situation, same furnace. You can change the details, but it is. And Nebuchadnezzar built the furnace to end these three's faith. Instead, the furnace became the place where the fourth man appeared. And the fourth man appeared to Richard Wurmbrand as well. Prison should have been the end of his ministry, but it became the place where his faith was deepened, his witness was strengthened, and his testimony reached the world. And we know that's what happened with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego because we're sitting here talking about it. And it did more than that in their own time too. But what was meant to break you may become the place where you learn more personally than ever before that Jesus isn't off in the distance watching you. Jesus is going through it with you. I mean, an enemy might build a furnace to destroy your faith, to make life hard, but God steps into the same furnace to deepen the faith. The important thing is the attitude. It all comes back to what I said at the beginning. We don't worship God because of what He can do for us. We worship God because of who He is. And when you worship God because of who He is alone, and you have the "and if not" attitude, these type of miracles can happen in your life. I'm not saying they do. I'm not saying they will. I'm no prosperity gospel. I don't know. But that's what's important between you and God, between me and God, is that we have the attitude "and if not." And we saw Him do it for someone. The fire that was meant to erase you becomes the place where you learn that Jesus is enough. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the furnace, their bodies were unharmed, their clothing was not scorched, and they didn't even have a smell of smoke on them. They didn't know that any of that would happen when they said, "and if not." It's easy to praise God after the furnace. Faith praises Him while standing in front of it. It's easy to trust when we already know the ending, but faith trusts God while the next page is still hidden. It's easy to declare that God is good when the prayer has been answered. Faith declares that He's good when heaven appears silent, and that's an important one, because that's one of the struggles I work with people the most on in their life. When they're going through something, they feel like God's ignoring them or it's falling on deaf ears. God sees what we can't see. I mean, there's a lot of people in here. I know people that are going through things, and I know because we're humans, you may not be now, but you will. If everything's going okay, isn't that one of Murphy's laws? If things are going great, just hang out a minute, it'll change. There's always something coming. That's not a gloomy statement when you have "and if not faith." Because when you have "and if not faith," the eternal perspective becomes much easier to see. You prayed, but nothing's happening. You know God's able, but you don't know if He will. Will He intervene? This is why people get so tempted to bow. They get tempted to bow. I told you how people reason their way out of it. I told you all the ways they could have reasoned their way out of it. Compromise or surrender your convictions, or become bitter and walk away from God because He hasn't followed a script that I wrote for Him, so we're done here. No, that's not how it works. This passage asks us a pretty tough question. Do we worship God because of what He can do for us? Or do we worship God because He's worthy, because He's God? This entire passage asks that question. Our circumstances may put a period where God wanted to put a comma, but we didn't have the "and if not" faith. "And if not" refuses to let disappointment become the end of your faith. They could have been how many of us would have walked in that furnace and said, I'm pretty optimistic something good's going to happen here. When they're walking you up to the flames, and the guys walking you up are getting scorched, it's not likely that a lot of people are going to have that I just got a good feeling about this. I think something may happen. No, but instead of being the eternal optimists, they said, I'm giving all my faith to the one who can do anything. That doesn't mean you don't get scared. That means you trust the one who knows all and can do all. Don't trust him. No. The way to throw that back in their face is those three words. No, I do trust him, and if not, if he doesn't do it, that's faith on fire, man. That is faith on fire. The life application, we have to identify the outcome that we make the conditions of trusting God. What are my parameters? What is it that will break my faith? Or what is it that I require of God that I'm going to trust him? And that's a way to self-examine and look inside. What could get taken or broken from you that are your conditions on trusting God? You answer those questions honestly, and then you pray boldly for what you desire. But you finish every prayer by surrendering the result. That means once you've prayed, you don't make the results conditional on God, because I'm always going on about the eternal perspective. This part here is just a dash. It's womb to tomb is the short walk. The eternal perspective is the long walk. The prayer I wrote down, the way to pray, Lord, I know you're able. I'm asking you to act. And if not, your answer is different from mine. I will not bow to fear, bitterness, compromise, or unbelief. I will still belong to you. What's the short way of saying that? Thy will be done. Jesus said that. That's the way we're supposed to. Thy will be done. And if I ask for something, and if not, if he decides not to do that, thy will be done. That's what it means to surrender that. Don't wait until the fire is extinguished to decide whether God is faithful. That question should be settled before the music plays. Before the furnace is heated, the world says, bow. Look, you can avoid the fire, okay? Just bow, avoid the fire. You don't have to worry about it. That's what the world says. Faith says, I'd rather stand with God in the fire than bow without him outside the fire. So, ask God for deliverance. They did. Believe he's able. They did. Look for miracles. Build your faith on something stronger than the outcome. All faith should be based on those three words. God, I know you can do this. And if not, all translations say something different. Some of them say, but if not, and even if not so, so these three words are the ones in the translation I read. And if not, they all mean the exact same thing. If God doesn't choose to do what I ask, I'm still not turning my back. Because the strongest faith isn't just believing that God will bring us out. It's knowing that whether he brings us out or walks through it with us, that we'll never bow. We'll never walk through another fire alone. And we won't bow to any God but the God. And these guys, these three here, faithfulness is often decided in moments that appear small to everyone except God. These are the moments I talked about. Small compromises. Well, God won't mind if I do. Well, God won't mind if I do this. Well, this isn't that big of a deal. To God, it's a big deal. These guys made a huge impact on an entire empire. Three Jewish guys that were slaves and they were trying to incorporate into their society because of this one little, what appeared small to everybody else. What's the big deal, man? Just do it. It's a big deal to me. It's a bigger deal to God. It's a huge deal. Our faith is witnessed by a world who sees God in us, just like they did them. Their refusal initially appeared to, when they first didn't do it, it didn't seem like it was that big of a deal. It's like, okay, well, you're going to die. That's it. It's over. Nobody saw what was coming, but it affected an empire. I wrote down five points. God had been publicly glorified because of these three, and if not. The king acknowledged God's unmatched power. Okay, let me stop there for a second. A lot of people teach that he converted and he worshiped their God. The Bible doesn't say that at all. He still spoke in polytheistic terminologies about other gods. He acknowledged God. But there's no reason for us to believe that Nebuchadnezzar repented and then followed God. But he did acknowledge God's unmatched power. Thirdly, an imperial decree protected God's name. Fourthly, the three men were promoted. Their lives got better because they would not turn their back on God in a society that is hostile to God. They said no, and if not, and life got better. That seems backwards and impossible. Big deal to God. Small thing to us, big deal to God. And finally, Babylon's highest officials witnessed the power of God, the one true God. So this private little decision not to bow down became a public testimony throughout an empire because of a faith that could not be shaken. These are the things we face in our personal struggles. Like, am I going to make my faith and trust conditional on the outcome? This happens a lot when we're about to lose someone. God, don't take them away. And then we pray the prayer. We call the pastor at home. We meet. We say, please don't take them. And then they pass away. And then we say, how could you do this to me? This was a child. This was my mother. This was my wife. How could you do this to me? Can't you stop this? Yeah, he can. But the key phrase is, and if not. And if not. Their private decision rocked an empire. The great lesson is that they didn't know those results were coming when they were walking to the furnace. They didn't know. They didn't know. In fact, they would expect severe consequences for saying, and if not. They obeyed before they saw the fourth figure, before the fire released their bonds, and before the king praised their God. So faithfulness is not our response after we know how the story ends. It's a sad reality that many go that path. Faithfulness is deciding whom we will worship while the furnace is being stoked, while the furnace is getting hotter. You can apply this to something in your life. You can apply this to the world at large. As you've heard me say a million times, 2 minutes after you die, you'll know exactly how you should have lived. And there's nothing more expensive than regret. So to face everything in life is a preview of the ultimate decisions. God can save us, and if not, that's a strong testament of faith. And my prayer is everyone thinks about that. Because if you haven't had a furnace yet, even a little furnace, they'll be there. Big ones will come. God can save you from it. And if not, well, you know the rest. All right.